Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay, and I'm sitting here with Steven Adams. Steve, I am so excited to interview you. When we first started talking, you had written a book. I want to make sure I get this right because this title is incredible. It's What's What and What to Do About It, Answers You Didn't Know You Wanted to Questions That You Didn't Know You Had. And that was really intriguing to me, but I would love to hear about your life as an author, as a screenwriter. You had talked about growing up with Jane and Kurt Vonnegut, your aunt and uncle. There's a lot to talk about here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I am so grateful for your attention. I truly am. The book itself was published 6 months ago, and so I've had a history of trying to promote it and trying to get attention paid to it. I wrote it as an experiment to see how I could do writing a book instead of a screenplay. Screenplays are what I've written for 40 years, and this was kind of a fun divergence from that. And it's been 6 months, and the main thing I've learned is it is tough to get attention to a book. There are hundreds of thousands of books, especially with self-publishing available, and they're just thrown into the pile, and so it's a tricky trail to follow, and I must admit I'm lousy at self-promotion.
Yeah, I can't imagine, right? I mean, I promote for this podcast and I promote for my practice, but it's like a sea, right? It's just like a wall of noise that you have to kind of punch through.
There are so many new platforms of competition. It's really, it didn't used to be like this. I mean, you mentioned that I grew up with Jane and Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt's ascent was in a whole different era, where none of these competing platforms existed, but and so there wasn't the competition, there wasn't the distraction, and so I don't know. I'm feeling like my experiment has been run. I'm very fond of this oddball book of mine. And I hope it has a longer life, but it's very difficult, and therefore I'm thanking you for turning people's attention to it for a short period.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I grew up reading a lot of Kurt Vonnegut. I grew up reading a lot of like writing from the 60s. Yeah. You know, I really have, talked to my girlfriend actually about this prepping for this interview, that I have nostalgia for this era that I was not alive for. You know, I was born in 1990, but there's just something very magical. And I really kind of came of age reading a lot of these works. So when I, saw your name cross my desk, when I saw Mark's name cross my desk, I was like, I got to talk to these guys. Like, this is like a dream of my, teenage and young adult self.
Yeah, you're terrific. That's wonderful to have that enthusiasm for an era you didn't live through.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that kind of my dad lived through, or this idea of, the music, the rock and roll, traveling the country. Kind of, I've read a lot of, Jack Kerouac, like stuff like that, right? The beat poetry. Yeah. I mean, all this stuff. There was this, again, this nostalgia. I went to the grad school I went to is Naropa University. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that in Boulder, Colorado.
I am not.
It's a Booth University. The Jack Kerouac School of Poetry is there. And a lot of the poets were in residence there, like Allen Ginsberg, for instance, was there. And it was part of that, hippie, Eastern spiritual Buddhist vibe here in Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, were you a part of that? Let's just dive right in. Like, what was your experience of that time?
let's back up.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason I grew up with Jane and Kurt Vonnegut and their three children, my first cousins, is that Kurt is my mother's brother. And in 1958, my parents, Alice, we knew she had cancer, and we knew she was going to die. We being myself and my three brothers. I was 11. My older brother was 14, and then I had a younger brother who was 9, and a baby brother who was 18 months. And so three of us were aware that my mother was dying of cancer. And she went into the hospital, and my father had a babysitter come and take care of the baby. And he drove my other two brothers and I to school. And then he went to do what he did every day, which was hop on a commuter train that took him to work in New York City. And that commuter train drove over a drawbridge, an open drawbridge.
Whoa.
3 cars plunged into the Hudson River. His body was found 3 days later, and 2 days earlier, my mother died in the hospital.
Oh my God! Yeah,
it's
like a freak accident. I mean, that's a crazy coincidence.
It's a freak coincidence. I mean, just the timing of it. It's crazy. But I asked you earlier if I had sufficient ashes to qualify for your show, and I did mean that, because this was horrible. We were a tight, oddball family. There's no question about it. And so, boom, in 2 days, on the 15th and the 17th of September, 1958, they both were gone suddenly. And the first person to arrive was Kurt Vonnegut, and then my father's sister, Louise Donner, and then people started coming, and it became real what had happened. And 1 week later, my 3 brothers and I jumped into 2 different cars, one driven by Kurt and one driven by my father's sister, Lou, and we were deposited at Kurt and Jane's big old house on Cape Cod, a house much too big for their family. And therefore, they were the only of our relatives who said, I will take all 4 of them. Others were saying, well, we can take 1, we can take 2. It was like we were like puppies.
Right.
You know? And they took us all. And so,
that's
boom.
Yeah.
We climb out of a car that we started sitting in New Jersey, and then we suddenly we're on Cape Cod, and Aunt Jane comes out to greet us, and her three kids, and we knew them because we had reunions over many years. You know, we were living in New Jersey, and it was like a 3 or 4 hour drive up to Cape Cod, and so we knew Uncle Kurt, we knew Aunt Jane, we knew Mark, Edie, and Nanny, but we were all confused because of what had happened. And now, boom, seven days later, we're asked to go to another school and live in another family and start another life.
Yeah, can you tell me, kind of zoom in on that a little bit, of what that was like for you, right? Like, what stories did you tell yourself? How did you make meaning of that? I mean, like you said, that's such an abrupt transition. It
is. You know, if you think of your childhood, at least my childhood and my brother's childhoods, you know, this moment divides everything. There was before, and then there was after. And my brothers and I are you know, we're getting old, and we talk about this, and we've come to really trying to find details in how each of us felt at that moment. Because as kids, you don't talk about it. You know, you're in different grades, you're in different schools once the transition is made. And I think my oldest brother became the man of the house in his mind, and so he did not emote. And my younger brother, Kurt, Tiger, he just went limp. And he, whatever he was asked to do, he did. And my little baby brother, Pete, only stayed with us for only 6 months because it's a complicated situation and still we don't understand it. But our little baby brother was moved down to Birmingham, Alabama to live with a relative we really didn't know well. And I think it was negotiated by my father's sister, Aunt Lou, who did not approve of the lifestyle of Kurt Vonnegut. He had a bohemian streak, and she was a country club lady, and we loved her. We loved them both. But I think as adults, we weren't privy to any of this. Lou and Kurt behind the scenes made this transfer of our little brother happen, and so those moments are just like little private snapshots that I can recall. Getting out of the car. We have 2 dogs, the dogs jumping up and down, and just whatever childhood memories you may have, they may be in the same form, which is just snapshots. It's not, and there's not really an emotional content. It doesn't seem. It's more the flatness of it. I see us arriving, and I see us. I can't remember so much. It's just it's a blur. But then there we were for the next. That was our new home.
Yeah, it's just like I said, it's like a series of impressions, right? Trying to make sense of that turbulence.
Yeah. And we each had our own, and we're finding out from each other. We each had our own response to this terrible thing that happened.
Yeah.
None of us, we were too young to know the power of this tragedy, and we're still sorting it out. But I will say this: my 3 brothers and I, a while ago, I asked them to rate their happiness at the moment from 1 to 10. 1, miserable. 10, I've had a great life. And we all were in the 9s,
Nice.
which is, and we weren't kidding around. And it's a terrible, terrible story. It was a terrible thing that happened to us. But so this is, yes, there were ashes, but boy, did we luck out in the navigating of life afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think the key factors were that helped you guys, recover?
Jane Vonnegut, for one.
Yeah.
She was our surrogate mother, who was already burdened with, already had 3 of her own young kids, and everyone was so attentive to us. And the kids, Mark, Edie, and Nanny, were so accepting. They stepped aside and let us sleep in their rooms with them. And you didn't realize it at the time. It was just like, oh, you pulled into a new hotel or something, and where are we sleeping now? But in retrospect, we were coddled, particularly by Jane, and we were embraced by the community. And our mother and father, for the 11 years that they affected my life, for the 14 years for Jim, for the 9 years for Tiger, and they they were irreplaceable, and Kurt and Jane were helpless against them becoming our parents. We were never legally adopted. They became our guardians, and personally, I was like a grateful guest in a new home rather than a member of a new family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. So what was that new home like? You said it was a bohemian lifestyle. Was it very different from how you were raised?
Oh, yeah. And Kurt, the difference between Kurt and my father was, you can't think of, well, you can, but I mean, they were very, very different people. Mm-hmm. My father was a holder and a hugger and a kisser. Mm-hmm. And Kurt he had always been slightly frightening because he was living in his head. Yeah. He was going back and forth. And when we moved in 1958, he was not Kurt Vonnegut, famous guy. He was Kurt Vonnegut writing like crazy in his room and selling sobs, in Sandwich 8 miles down the road. And so this whole fame thing, it was slow to develop. And so it was like, this isn't my dad. Thank you, though, sir. Jane, thank you so much. And I paid most attention to, sports and school, and distracted myself for those things.
Yeah, it's kind of got involved in your life, right? Did the kid stuff.
Yeah, did the kid stuff, but with a backdrop of embarrassment because we were orphans. It was, it was used in a funny way sometimes. We got the orphans. We were the orphans, and they were the real children. So there was nothing delicate about it, but it was a house of absolute adventure and chaos.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like tons of fun.
It was
tough, but chaotic, right? Like
I'll circus. Tell you what, it was mostly fun, even though there was this agony, a ribbon of agony.
Right, there's like undercurrent of tragedy, but there's still there was still love and community and connection there. Right?
Yeah. And so that was constant, and boy, did that pay off. We all got 9s. We're all in our 70s, and I think Mark and Edie and Nanny would give you a 9 too.
Nice. Well, we're going to move to our first commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about the birth of your writing name, your like pseudonym, Waldo Mellon, and kind of move into that. So if you're listening, hang on. We'll see how the story develops when we get back.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit marc-azulay.teachable.com. That's Marc, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Where can you listen to some of the world's top life coaches ready to dish out success tips and entrepreneurial guidance? The Voice America Empowerment Channel will do just that. Whether it's personal growth, building a better business, or inspirational life stories, make it a daily habit to tune into our programs. From weight loss and personal branding to law of attraction and increased happiness, you'll find it every day at voiceamericaempowerment.com. The Voice America Empowerment Channel. It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed.
Our thoughts and feelings not only affect our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us. Find new meanings of love, authentic expressions, and better connections with the people in your life. Tune in to Love Light with Dr. Jean Marie Farish. This program will feature guests and discuss ideas that will bring a better life to you. When you find this perspective on love, it will change everything. Listen live every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. I'm sitting here with Steve Adams, or should I say Waldo Mellon. Something that really stood out to me about your PR package was that you used a pen name, and it was a name that you said you developed in college when you were at Dartmouth. Can you say more about the story and the kind of origination of that person, that character, what that was like?
Sure. It's the first time I ever used a pseudonym, and because this is the first book I've ever written. I've spent my last 40 years writing screenplays, and they were always as Steve Adams. But so now when I decided to run this experiment and had an idea about what that experiment might be, which was a fake advice column, and people invented by me, ask this fake advice columnist, Waldo Mellon, questions that I, Steve Adams, want to know the answer to, and then get to sit down and write the answers to. I get to revise, and I get to think about it, and I have the luxury of, figuring things out that I want to figure out. The notion of calling myself not Steve Adams, but Waldo Mellon, released me from my Steve Adamsness. Waldo Mellon is has a pompous streak to him. He really is confident in his optimism, and I really like this guy, and I really like writing in his voice. The name Waldo Mellon was given to me by when I was at college at Dartmouth, and I was in a rock band, the Flower Thieves.
Nice.
The Flower Thieves. Yeah, don't forget, this was like 68, 69. The Flower Thieves. So he gave me the name Waldo Mellon, and there was Penrod Twig, and we all had a name. And then this guy, John Twist, 20 years after college, killed himself. And I loved this guy. I went out of high school, and you meet these new characters, and this was like a guy out of a novel that has not yet been written. He was so vibrant, so alive, and he was so enthusiastic about the Flower Thieves. He was a terrible student, but he was such fun, such enthusiasm. He would oil his voice before our performances, which were quite few and only in fraternities. We weren't really very good, but we were good enough to play on Saturday night at homecoming, that kind of thing. It just occurred to me. I wanted his memory to live, and so I loved being Waldo Mellon. I also used the name Waldo Mellon for a character. We used to have talent shows in our yard. I'm looking out at the yard where the talent shows used to be. I've lived in this house for 40 years, and it was crazy. I put on a crazy hat, and I'd come out. I made a fool of myself, but I loved it. It was fun to be silly, and it was Waldo Mellon, and I had a cordless microphone. I'd come out and I'd be dancing, and then introducing the acts. The acts were terrible. That was part of it. It was just, local people coming, but the yard was filled with human beings. The acts were memorable, and so Waldo Mellon was alive once a year in those shows. That was like 6 or 8 August afternoons. And then when I wrote this book, it became a Waldo Mellon. And I have friends who just call me Waldo. And it's just, there's a part of me that is purely Waldo. You have to read, you have to get the book to find out Waldo's voice. It's different from my voice. Do you, Mark? I don't feel I'm explaining it really. There's another. This releases me from something. It's like, hey, don't blame me. Waldo said that. that kind of thing. And so, I'm pleased with this, with the use of this part of me.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that. So, I study Jungian psychology, and they talk a lot about the use of archetypes and the use of masks and the use of roles, right?
Yeah.
There's another thing I study called psychodrama. It's kind of what you're talking about, of when you inhabit a role, you get to accentuate parts of yourself and you get to leave other parts behind.
It's exactly that, Mark.
It is very powerful. It's very, very powerful. There was, part of my story, I was like a shy kid shut down. Yeah. And I learned how to dance. But I learned how to dance wearing a mask. I would go to I was in Pittsburgh, I go to raves, and I would go to, these kind of underground scenes, right? And I would wear these crazy masks, and behind the mask, it wasn't me. Yes. Right? I could act, I could be the character. I was I was part of the scene. I wasn't myself.
Right.
And when I was inhabiting this role, all of my own, insecurities and pain and nervousness were just gone. Immediately gone. Immediately gone.
Right.
Something that dictated my life.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested. Sounds like we're having some resonance here of that experience for you, because I think it is a psychologically just really lightning bolt experience. And I'm really just curious about the birth of this character.
It's those talent shows. That's not the only time that I hid behind something.
Yeah.
When Halloween would come, as an adult, there'd be these adult parties, everybody would have on a mask. And you could walk up to someone who you know and love. They don't know who it is. And I was so freed by that. I was so, and it was almost like afterwards, the next day, what is going on? Why am I so eager and happy when I can peer into the eyes of my closest friends and they don't know who I am. Mm-hmm. And I can't answer that, Mark. I just can't.
Well, because you don't, I don't know if it's the answer. Where my mind goes is that you don't know who you are either, right? In that moment, it's like a novel encounter.
Yeah.
And you get to inhabit whatever character you're dressed up in. Right? I think if you look at the use of masks, right? Through all cultures, every single culture uses masks and characters and archetypes and drama, right? And play to some extent. It is a very human, and some would say, me included, a very spiritual thing, actually, to inhabit an archetype.
And not uncommon. It's something that...
universal. Universally human. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So you're not crazy, but you're tapping into something I think very ancient, actually.
Yes, I can't tell you how much, and I still like it. If the occasion ever arises, then I can do that some more. I even have a recollection of going to a party where I didn't know these people well, and I mingled and talked to people, and they would know who Steve Adams was, but they didn't know that Steve Adams ever was at that party, and it was like it felt like something, Mark, wicked about it. That I had the full power in it. I knew who I was. I knew who I was talking to, and I could do anything I wanted. And so there was
you could say anything, right? You could do anything.
Say anything, do anything, put on a voice. It's like,
yeah. So you talk about when you inhabit the Waldo character, right? You talk about that he has more optimism. I'm curious other differences between you and Waldo. Like what do you put on and then what do you take off, right?
I put on that everything that I know is true, that I've traveled much more than I have traveled. I talk about my travel, when I'm in between acts on this talent show thing. I've been to far off lands and I've learned this and I've learned that. And I one year, the suit I wear unitard, and the unitard has lightning bolts shooting out from my loins.
Nice.
And so I talk about the power of my loins, and I've set up people in the audience with helium balloons. They're holding helium balloons, and I say, "Well, what's this? Even with my loins, I can burst a balloon." And I just set up people with BB guns, and I got a show of thrusting my loins toward a balloon. Pop! It pops. And nobody's fooled. Everybody knows what a tacky gimmick this is. But Waldo thinks he's all powerful, and it's just a pleasure not to be Steve Adams introducing a neighbor's kid. This is like, it's a big talent show, and I've been around the world, and so there's something in my personality that wants to do that.
Yeah, does it let you embrace power? Like really, I mean, there's a silliness to it, but there's also there's a power element to it, right? There's this idea of you're magical, right? Your loins shoot lightning, and like you said, there's a wickedness to like wearing the mask, right? There's like I'm hearing that this power theme coming up.
I know what you're saying, but I don't think so. I don't think it was a power thing. I think it was. Here's the thing. I told you I write screenplays, and I experimented writing this book. I want to be funny, and so I know that this loin thing and the outfit and this crazy bonnet that I wore, it's laughs I'm after, and that's been my writing career is trying to be funny, and that's why I'm so sad that What's What and What to Do About It by Waldo Mellon has just not gotten the attention that I wanted it to. I was told to go on Twitter, which I did for 6 months. Mark, I have 53 followers.
Oh,
that's not so good.
That's not so good. That's not so good.
And it's either the nature of the book is too confusing, which I don't think it is. I think it you do have to get it to understand it. I cannot describe it to you, but I just have great faith that the people who have gotten it and the people who have enjoyed it have convinced me that there's much good about it.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick technical question, right? Because I am also a marketer. Did you go on Twitter as Steve or as Waldo?
The real Waldo M is how you get on Twitter.
Okay, but is your voice, like as you're tweeting, is that the Waldo voice or is that the Steve voice?
What do you mean by the voice? I am so tech stupid. I was told, by the publicist, at Waldo Mellon, at the real Waldo Mellon. That gets you to my website, my Twitter site.
Yeah, but then you got to tweet, right? You got to say stuff. You got to post on Twitter.
And then, believe me, for the first 3 months, every morning I would take pictures of my books. I book up in the trees and on my dog and behind a statue. I'd pick out what I thought were funny and representative excerpts from it. And I don't know what I was doing wrong. I don't think I will
tell you. As this is a marketing clinic right here live on the show. Good. I think what would be really helpful is to make a Twitter account as Waldo Mellon, right? Type in his voice, and that's not you, right? It's him. And write stuff, right? Comment on other people, find celebrities, find other popular accounts, comment as Waldo Mellon, right? Like bring his voice, make the character come to life, right? Be the character, right? Forget about promoting the book. The promoting is like not that interesting for people. Like just be the character, make quips, make comments, be pompous, right? Like do that online.
How do I do that? I'm on Twitter. Now where do I go?
You search for people. Maybe talking. You search for people, right? You search for, I don't know, Donald Trump, right? That guy's got all kinds of shit. Well, I guess he's not on Twitter anymore.
I do no searching. Nobody told me to do searching. Yeah. Did you see how lame I am with this?
It's lame. Well, we're gonna fix it right now. Yeah, search for people, celebrities, people that are hot in the news.
How do I do that? How do I search for other people on Twitter?
Yeah. And then you can go.
Be a wise guy. Be Waldo Mellon to them.
To them, yes.
Really?
Yes, you can retweet, you can reply, you can comment, like just be Waldo Mellon out online. And then at some point people will be like, hey, who the heck is this guy? You know, who is this character? And they'll find the book, right?
Really? So
want more of it.
I know I'm going to annoy you by asking you some more questions because I'm going to go to Twitter after we get off here.
Great.
I'm just going to. May I email you or something like that with a question or two?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to get on the call. We can talk during the break about that too. But I am excited, right? I'm excited and I'm inspired by this character thing because I do think the mask thing is so unbelievably strong. I think that like being like, I try to think of the archetype you're inhabiting. It's like a little bit jester is what I'm hearing, a little bit like trickster. That's right. Like there's kind of like the low-key coyote kind of vibe going on.
That's right.
And you know, we need that. So for those listening, hang on. And when we come back, we'll hear some advice from Waldo Mellon. Take care.
Follow us on Twitter at VoiceAmericaTRN. Get the lowdown on guests, new shows, and your favorites. That's VoiceAmericaTRN.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
Are you ready to move to your next level? Listen for Empowering Women, Transforming Lives with host Rebecca Hall-Greider. Each show will focus on a central topic with discussion, guests, and your questions being featured. Our show is perfect for women who feel a call in their heart to step out in a bigger, more powerful way in their life and just need some encouragement, inspiration, and practical steps to support them on their journey. Empowering Women, Transforming Lives can be heard live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, with a replay of the show Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time and 4 p.m. Eastern on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Get the news on our shows and other happenings by following us on Twitter. Find us at Voice America TRN or twitter.com/Voice America TRN.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. In our final segment, we talk directly to the listeners, and I think, Steve, this is a chance for Waldo to give some advice. So I'm curious, what are some of the topics that show up in the book, and what's Waldo's take on them?
You're not going to, I don't think you're going to get that, because each letter that I write to myself asks a specific question in a voice that of a person who I invent. And so part of the pleasure of it is just, it could be a 14-year-old girl, it could be an old man, it could be a woman who's going through a divorce, it could be anybody, and they end up asking a question that about things like, I'm looking at the table of contents right now. Mm-hmm. The first chapter is a brand new word. It's a word you've never ever heard before. It's called vucule. And now you have to read this chapter, what a vucule is. I don't want to use our time doing that, but I will talk to you, Waldo will talk to you about brains. What Waldo thinks about how a brain works. Mm-hmm. He'll talk to you about genitals.
Nice.
What genitals? What's going on with those?
Okay. Well, hold on. What if could you do it live? Like, what if I ask you a question? Could you try to?
No. I'd love to run the experiment, but these are all questions where I have no special skills, and just like, if someone comes up to me on the street and asks me a private question or a question about their relationship, I really got to sit and think. It's not like I have some special, I ask a question which is generally the answer has to do with a big area of life. Yeah. And so I don't pretend to have any real special gift, except for if I pause and think about it. I'm not a good improvisational person. Okay. But I have great faith, and I really enjoy the task of these are broader questions than, I have two sisters and a brother, and my brother, they're not like that. You'll see if you read it. It's a much more it's a broad-sided issue that hopefully you can take something from.
I have a pretty broad issue. Do you want to try it? And if you need more time, you can always just bail. How about that?
Sure. What's your problem, Mark?
Okay, so I got a broadside issue is I just bought a home with my girlfriend, and we're moving in. together, right? And we're looking at like, you know, starting a family and getting married and taking those next steps in life.
Yes.
Right. And I am fucking terrified. I am terrified. I'm excited, but I'm really, really scared of seeing like growing up and taking this next step and moving into like the fatherhood family phase. What would Waldo say about that?
Because the letters are never a give and take. The letter just sits there, and so you can't ask the letter writer a question. I think Waldo would direct you to his chapter on yes, no, and maybe.
Okay.
Until you are positive, until you have a strong yes, Waldo will give you a series of questions to which you will learn the difference between yes, no, and maybe. If you're feeling, if you have this fear, fine, until you feel a yes, a certain yes. Not a maybe means no. Maybe means don't do this wedding yet. Don't do it yet. Until you go, okay, I'm afraid, I'm scared. This is all part of the beauty of love and this phase of my life. And until you can convince yourself of that, until you can get a strong yes. Sorry, what's your partner's name?
Caroline.
Caroline. Does she feel the same fear?
No. I mean,
she's full in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're both at a yes, but it's just like the fear of like the next step. I think is what I'm feeling.
Boom. Yeah. Do it.
Yeah.
If you're both at yes, do it. Who isn't afraid? It's only the dewy-eyed idealists that are going, oh, I'll never love anybody else. Of course you're afraid. Mm-hmm. That would be Waldo's take. But Waldo would get to, kind of have his tone in the answer. Mm-hmm. And you would see that there'd be, the quiz is nothing but funny, where you go, do you want to have glass chips poked into your eye? No.
That's a no.
That's a no. Would you like to have your, I wish I could get to the chapter. There's other, there's ridiculous ones that are clearly, oh, yes, that's what I want. And so you assess your feeling, the difference between yes and no. And if it's maybe, don't do it, folks. Wait for yes.
I think that's great. So it has like a combination of advice with humor, with kind of life lessons that you learned. Yeah.
And if you completely disagree, it at least sharpens your argument for disagreeing. Mm-hmm. This guy's full of shit, this guy.
Right. You can push up against him, right? You can
absolutely
push back if you want.
For that kind of a comeback. Mm-hmm. So that's fun, but this is once again an experiment. As an experiment, I'm very proud of, and I wonder if I'll write more screenplays. Screenplays is what I've done. I love the attention to this book, but I'm worried about my next project.
Yeah, can you say more about that? What's the worry?
There's two things. I would love to follow up on this book with a book called "What's Death and What to Do About It." Mm-hmm. And I have written a draft of this, and the publisher, Seven Stories Press, before this book, was very, very interested. But now the limp sales of this book, thanks to who knows what, has discouraged them from considering the follow-up book. And so I have to either get better at promotion or go back to writing screenplays. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm turning a screenplay into into a book, which I'm excited about. So my days are filled with writing, which is my favorite thing to do, even though I agonize. I just feel, as particularly these days.
Yeah.
Do you have days where it just seems like you cannot break through?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm in the process of pivoting my business, and there's a nervousness there of like, what if it doesn't work? What if I'm not loud enough? How do I compete? Right.
Yeah.
Like, my job is switching from being a clinical therapist to being more of a business owner and being a marketer and the face and the brand and doing all this because that's what it takes, and I'm also going to probably hire somebody coming up next year that knows more of the technical side of marketing as far as like, paid advertisements and all that stuff, because like you said, it's super complicated. People go to school, grad school, higher education around this. Like, it is a hard thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I got pretty far by myself, but now that I want to hire some employees to work with me, I'm going to get even louder, right? Yeah. And stand out even more, because now I have more mouths to feed. And I'll be honest, like there's a nervousness there for sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being 75 years old, it's a whole different ballgame. Mm-hmm. You look at the past, have opportunities been squandered, and you understand any bias there might be against someone of my age, and so there's no bitterness, and there doesn't seem to be much regret, but it's just the reality of it. I would like another gasp of attention.
Yeah.
In writing movies, I will confess that I've had 3 movies made, and I loved my screenplays, and so did the people who invested in them. Mm-hmm. But the movies were no damn good, in my opinion. It's such a collaborative enterprise that it explains why there's so many bad movies out there.
Yeah, once you get like the writer's room and the producers and everyone has like a piece of the pie, right? I've heard that from other people in the industry.
And then the actors get it in their mouths, and the director, is slave to different things, and it just becomes like, a very disappointing piece of shit in the trailer you're leaving behind.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, because it's kind of like lowest common denominator, right? I mean, imagine it kind of just like washes out, it dilutes what the original intent was.
Yes, and if the tone is off, especially if it's supposed to be funny, then it's painful. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I've had nothing but painful experiences in that regard.
Yeah, I've heard that comedy is the hardest to write, right? Because either it hits or it doesn't.
It either hits or doesn't, and it's hard to. I'm thinking of Larry David. Larry David, he's the boss, and that's what it takes. That's what it takes for something to work. A single voice who makes all of the adjustments. And I was invited to the sets for a couple of days, but I was just sort of as a formality, because the Writers Guild demanded it. So
yeah, that's a bummer, man. Well.
Yeah,
we just wrap up here. We'll talk a little bit more offline about how to use Twitter and how to make that happen. But as we're wrapping up, where can people find you? They want to find you online. If they want to find the book, this is your chance to kind of do the promotion.
On Twitter, at The Real Waldo M. At The Real Waldo M, everybody. Mm-hmm. Or if you, there's lots of places where you can, on that website, where you can actually push a button and access the book. Amazon is among them, but there's local bookstores. Any local bookstore, wherever you live, will have access to what's what and what to do about it. And I would hope you'd go to them as opposed to Amazon for various reasons. You'll have to wait longer to get it. It'll make you long for more. And And the bookstore, the independent bookstore will be happy. What's what and what to do about it? Go to your bookstore and have them order it. And I would be so grateful.
That's great. Well, thanks
You're going to like it. You're going to like it. I'm telling you.
Buy the book. You'll love it. All right. Well, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate our conversation. We'll talk a little bit more offline about some of this stuff. For those tuning in, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media, like it, give us a 5-star review on Apple. We're trying to build up those. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I will see you next week, another episode of From the Ashes.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay on From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Meet triumph and defeat and treat those two imposters the same.